So chapter 7, rhythms originating in the sinus node. So this is, I pulled up a picture of the heart, the inside. This is, if you can tell, this little piece right there, when the heart is healthy, it should start right here, sinus node. And if it goes through there first, if it starts from there, then you will get a P wave. This is the AV node down here, AV node or AV junction. Now these right here are the ventricles. It says, you'll recall the sinus node is a normal pacemaker of the heart. The sinus node fires its impulse, which travels through the atria. So this is this little piece right there, as you can tell. Sorry, my light is all wrong. Sinus node, it travels through the atria. The atria is these two up here, causing the atrial depolarization, which is the cell charge, which makes the heart pump, right? The first little P wave was the first pump. It's caused by the impulse firing right here in the top. Then it goes through the sinus node, which is right here in the bottom, and writing. Oh, so then it writes a P wave, right? If it goes to the top, the impulse then hits down through the AV node and then to the ventricles. The ventricles are down here. That's where the QRS is written. Also, it's called ventricular depolarization. And that, like I said, the QRS. Well, that's what happens when it goes through the heart. It says, although they can be irregular at times, sinus are, for the most part, regular. They're like the ticking of a clock, predictable and expected. You'll recall the inherent rate of the sinus node is 60 to 100, but also remember that this rate may go higher or lower. So the first rhythm we have is a sinus rhythm. The sinus rhythm says, this is how you can tell it's a sinus rhythm, 60 to 100 beats per minute. It's regular. The P waves are upright in most leads, although they may be normally inverted in another lead. One P to each QRS, and all P waves have the same shape. All matching upright P waves are sinus P waves. It says, until proven otherwise. The PR is 0.12 seconds to 0.20 seconds, constant from beat to beat. QRS is less than 0.12 seconds. You don't really have to look at the cause, adverse effects, and treatment. None of that right now. See, it says a sinus rhythm. You see that? Sinus rhythm. It doesn't matter. Some QRSs might be a little bit wider than others. And the P waves, you have to make sure that you make sure to measure the P wave, the beginning of the P wave to the beginning of the QRS, to make sure it's not more than their 0.20 seconds, because then it'll be something else. And the QRS, make sure it's less than 0.12 seconds. But other than that, it has a one P wave to each QRS, one P wave to each QRS, and it's constant, and they're all there. They're all there. Just look at them really closely. Some of them might look like it's not, but you'll see a little bump. You'll see a little bump. That's sinus rhythm. Sinus brady or sinus bradycardia. The beats are less than 60 beats per minute. It's regular. The rhythm is regular. The same upright. The P waves are upright in most leads, although may not be inverted in another lead. One P wave to each QRS. P waves shaped the same. P to P interval is regular. The PR interval is 0.12 seconds to 0.20 seconds, constant from beat to beat. The QRS itself, it's less than 0.12 seconds. This is what a sinus bradycardia would look like. You see it's further apart, but it still has a P wave before the QRS and then a T wave after. P wave before, QRS, T wave after. And each one of these is a heartbeat. It's just slower now, right? Bradycardia. It's slower, less than 60 beats per minute. Sinus tachycardia is the opposite of being slow. It's going very fast. The rate is 101 beats per minute to one, so over 100. Over 100 beats per minute, all the way to 160 beats per minute, okay? It says, according to most experts, the sinus does not, let me take this slide out, does not fire at a rate above 160 in supine resting adults. I don't know exactly what that means all the way, but anyways, it's between 100 to 160. Everything, the rhythm is regular. P waves upright in most leads, although may be inverted in another lead. One P wave to each QRS. P waves shaped the same. P to P interval are regular. Intervals, the PR interval is 0. Remember what interval is, the P wave, from the beginning of the P wave to the beginning of the QRS. Each one you should count. Later on you would have an idea by yourself. But the P to R interval is 0.12 seconds to 0.20 seconds, constant from B to B. The QRS itself is less than 0.12 seconds. And then this is going to be the way a sinus tachycardia rhythm looks like. So in 1/62, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You add a 0 in the end, you get 120 beats per minute. That's sinus tachycardia or sinus tach. Sinus arrhythmia. Sinus arrhythmia. It says sinus arrhythmia is the only irregular rhythm from the sinus node, and it has a pattern that is cyclic. What is that? Cyclic? And usually corresponds with the breathing pattern. The QRS complex can be positive, negative, or isoelectric depending on the lead being monitored. So the rate, it varies. It varies. It could be low, it could be high. It says it varies with the respiratory pattern. Faster with inspiration, slower with expiration. The negative pressure in the chest during inspiration sucks up the blood from the lower extremities, causing an increase in blood returning to the right atrium. It's just telling you why it could be, irregular. So like it says, regularity, irregular in a repetitive pattern. Longest R to R cycle exceeds the shortest by greater or equal to 0.16 seconds, which is 4 or more little blocks. It would vary around that much, P waves upright in most leads, although maybe inverted in other leads. P waves shape the same, 1 P to each QRS. P to P would also be irregular because the P wave usually stays. It should stay with the QRS. So if the QRS is all over the place, the P wave is going to be all over the place with it. They say the QRS and the P wave are supposed to be married to each other. They stay together all the time. And there's a saying, but I don't remember how it goes. And then something about the P wave and the QRS is married, but then if they start separating, I don't know. I'll look into that later, and I'll tell you what that means. But when it's a normal rhythm, the P wave should be married or always close with the QRS. Sinus arrhythmia. Look at this. So you see it. You see this one's a little bit longer. I mean, you might see it a little bit longer. Sometimes they look, if you just look at it a little bit, see this one might look like a P wave, a PAC, which later on or maybe in this chapter we might get into it. I don't know, but for the most part, is is marching out, but you might get one a little bit longer, and maybe one a little bit longer, but the P wave still is still there and it's still the same length up to the QRS. It's just a little bit further out and everything, but for the most part, that'd be a sinus arrhythmia. Sinus arrest. There's going to be two that are going to be a little bit confusing. It has sinus arrest and it has sinus block. When you're in at work and you see like a pause, most likely you'll call it a pause, and then you'll count it in seconds. So see, you see this, it has 2 second pause. Sometimes the calipers, which is a measuring device on the computer, it'll help you measure that pause. So like if something like this happens, you'll call the nurse right away and say they had a pause. Sometimes they get longer pauses because their health is deteriorating. So you have to, make sure that to look out for those pauses. But here the book says sinus arrest. I don't know. I'm sorry, it's blurry, but sinus arrest is a pause that occurs when the regularly firing sinus node suddenly stops firing for a brief period. One or more PQRST sequences will be missing. An escape beat from a lower pacemaker may then take over for one or more beats. That means this is a lower pacemaker. This is not sinus. Remember, we said this before. If the QR starts to look white like that, most likely it's coming from the impulse. They caught it in the ventricles or whatever. That's when it's helping make a beat or whatever. But this is it still saves the heartbeat or the patient because it's still beating, but it's a dangerous beat because it's not beating and then sinus. you know so that's what it's saying. So after a pause you might get a lower pacemaker take over. So you won't see when there's a pause, or that they call here sinus arrest. You won't see QRS. They'll be missing. That's a pause. I just call it a pause. I don't know. I can get questions and then I can ask somebody else what they think. um So it says the pause is not a multiple of the previous R to R intervals. So the I think one of the main differences between sinus arrest and sinus block is that sinus arrest, it'll be missing, and then it'll go back. It might go back, start marching out at whatever time, different time that that it feels like popping back up again. That's sinus arrest. But the sinus block, supposedly it's right. It starts to pick up right where it left off, and that's what it's saying, that's a difference. But like I said, I don't really know. I just know that I just call it a block. I'm sorry, yeah, a pause, and then I'll tell them how long the pause was for. Something that you need to know. So for this, in this case, there's an underlying rhythm. That's what you call, like, say this is a patient, right? They're normally running sinus rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Sinus rhythm or sinus Brady, right? Depending on the heart rate. But they have a P wave to each QRS. Everything looks good except this pause. So the underlying rhythm would be sinus rhythm or sinus Brady. And then they'd say with a pause and an escape beat. This is an escape beat. Some people might call it maybe a PVC, but I think this would be an escape beat. So an underlying rhythm is what they're normally running. As far as the P wave, it says normal sinus P waves before the pause, normal or different shaped P waves, if even present, on the beat ending the pause. So I guess it's saying normal P. Some of this stuff I have to refresh myself. So we're kind of going over this book together because I be forgetting some of these little rules that they have. So the book is saying, and just to so you can know, this is third edition. So I'm sure they come up with other little stuff here and there, but this is the basics, of what you'll be experiencing up there, and they'll probably change later. And some places might have different rules, so you'll learn that with time. You'll learn that with time. But anyways, normal sinus P waves before the pause. Okay, normal or different shaped P's, even if they're present on the beat ending the pause. So you see this ending, I guess it ends the pause. There's no P wave there. And then they have a escape beat right there. So you might have some different stuff happening after that pause. So bottom line, for pauses or sinus arrest, sinus block, they're both, I would consider them pauses. So bottom line is they should be having an underlying rhythm. In this case, like I said, this would be sinus rhythm or sinus Brady, looks like a little bit, depending on the heart rate. Like I said, the computer, for the most part, it measures it for you. But underlying rhythm for this patient would be sinus Brady or sinus rhythm with a 2-second pause followed by an escape beat. So you see how the rhythm won't just be easily said sinus rhythm. No, you might have other stuff. You might have multiple PVCs, frequent PVCs. You might have frequent PACs. We'll learn that. We'll learn that together. We'll learn that throughout the book so you can have an idea. But usually, uh, usually I guess they'll have most rhythms are sinus rhythms, but you'll have some with stuff in there, and you have to just make sure to say the underlying rhythm, and then what else do you see in that rhythm? These are some practices. I did this a while back, so I mean, just so you can have an idea. And some of this I thought I had to go to the back of the book to see, because at the beginning I was a little bit confused. So some of the stuff that I wrote down or I took guesses at, whatever. So it's just an idea. Okay, so QRS, upright, same shape. Regularity, is it regular or irregular? You, for the most part, you could tell it's regular, but you see how this rhythm does not look like this rhythm. I mean, I don't know, like I said, I don't know what that's about. I don't know why a lot of you'll get different looking rhythms, but if for the most part you still see a P wave and a QRS, a P wave, QRS, T wave, P, QRS, T, and then you count the heart rates, 1, 2, 3, whatever, then that's how you know the rules, and you see what you have right there. So this one says sinus rhythm PR interval is 0.20, QRS is what is that, 0.16. So it's a sinus rhythm. This one is a little faster. You see how it's kind of swaying. There's some artifact in there. Maybe the patient is breathing hard, or I don't know, has lotion and is not picking up, just good. So it might have. So I put on there, or maybe I copied it from the back of the book, I don't know, but it's sinus tack with sway baseline. Because if you count the QRS, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that's 120 heart rate. The back of the book might have said 125. So I checked it. I checked it, I guess, when I was learning this. Let me see if I have something else kind of funny. I'm gonna go over two more. This one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a sinus Brady. This is wide in QRS. You see how this is a little bit wide? So this is one of the confusing parts, and there, I guess we should be writing notes on some of this stuff. Not all. If there's a P wave in front of the QRS, And each one, that means for the most part is healthy. It's not a ventricular, because when you go down to ventricular and you get a wide QRS, then you won't have a P wave and you know that something's wrong. But this one, the QRS is a little bit wider. That's still okay. You just have to mention it in the notes because it's still marching out. It's just a little bit wide. That is a sign of something that I might be getting later, and you have to, I guess, let the nurses know. So you'd say sinus Brady with, depending on the place that you're working at, they might go for BBB, which means bundle branch block, or you'd say IVCD. I don't know exactly what, the place that you'd be working at, but they have different ways of calling it. So I just put white in QRS because I was kind of new with the whole EKG or whatever. So, but at work, I'd say sinus Brady with a bundle branch block or IVCD. That's what I'd say for that one, because you have, so everything is still good. It's still sinus. Any sinus you will have P waves. So sinus, like I said, is still a sign of a good heart. It's just a little low. Heart rate's a little low, and that's okay. It might be still okay for some patients. This one, you could tell it's inverted. That's still okay. That's still okay. The P waves up. That's just when it's like that. It's just like one of those rhythms. Is different. And like I said, I don't know why. I don't know why some of these rhythms are like that. But some might be, some QRSs might be like that. Except the only thing you need to be looking, I guess, and make sure that, like I said, still that they have a P wave. Now, if the P wave was inverted to each one, it might mean that the leads are wrong on the patient. That it could mean that, or later on it could possibly mean is a junction, which is the next chapter that we're going to read. It might be a AV junction rhythm, but I think for the most part, the first thing you should say, ask the nurses or the the PCAs, or the leads on right. If the P wave, I'm saying if the P waves were inverted, like down, 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 down. The QRS is still okay like this. Just make sure the P waves are up. Now this one, look at that big old pause. So this one, for the most part, you could tell that it's running sinus Brady. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got 5, 6, almost 6 boxes between these. That's a whole second and 20 a second and 0.20 seconds. I'd have to have a caliper for that. Heart rate is saying between 20 beats per minute. It's running sinus Brady. So for this big old pause, you'd count 5 blocks. Each little block, remember I said, is 0.04 seconds, and you say 4 times 5 is 20 seconds. 0.20 seconds. 0.20 seconds, right? So you have 0.20, 0.20, 0.20, 0.20, 0.20. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 1 second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 2 seconds. 2 seconds, and then 2, 4, 6, 8. So it's almost 3-second pause. I didn't write that in because, like I said, back in the day I was still kind of learning. But that's this rhythm. It doesn't look so good. It looks like it's gonna keep having pauses until it's a straight line, no heartbeats. I'm probably gonna give you one more for sinus. This is a sinus arrhythmia. See how it goes in and out, like it's not marching out. It's irregular, but it's still a P wave in each one. The QRS is still narrow, so it's still good. Everything looks good except it's not, so it's irregular. It's not regular, but you still see a P wave because it's still a sinus is still a rhythm in the sinus, that's coming from the sinus. So that's sinus arrhythmia. And for that, like I said, you still would get the heart rate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 60 beats per minute. Chapter 7 notes, just so you can, I guess, I know it doesn't look really good, but you should, I guess, if when you take notes, just make sure to put the sinus criteria, heart rate, the name of the rhythm. You got sinus Brady, sinus tech. You can always pause and then take pictures and then write them down and then delete them or whatever. But remember to you know to put on the notes about the QRS if it's bigger. Yeah, I mean if it's bigger than usual, you'd call it either a bundle branch block or a IVCD in capital letters, all of them. Um, Everybody has an underlying rhythm. That means what they're normally running. Um, so just make sure, see some of those criteria. I mean, I hope for the most part you can still kind of see. Remember, sinus arrest and sinus block, for the most part, to me, are just pauses, and those are measured by seconds. How many seconds was it? Was it not? The heart rate had stopped. So how many seconds? That's how you would notify the nurse.